Hello everyone. I'll start with the t-shirt reveal. I'm just a kitty cat wandering through space. That is my nice neutral shirt. My shirts often are chosen to express or project my mood, and so this morning it was just very default, very neutral. My general view of the world, that we are all a bunch of kitty cats in space. Kind of my vibe. I like space cats. Sci-fi stories that have space cats are often a lot of fun. So the one I'm deeply engaged in now is Expeditionary Force, a dramatically read sci-fi, almost like serial drama, like the old-timey radio dramas. And it's put in this wonderful buddy movie sort of context between this super intelligent AI from a elder race and New Englander, what would you call it, lower class? The upper class New Englanders would definitely call them lower class, the working class, the blue collar of New England. Joe Bishop as the one of the buddies in the duo. And there's the Max Alt, which is the cat race. And there's inevitably a cat race in the Jerry Pornelli, Larry Niven Ringworld universe. It's the Zin, K-Z-I-N, and, you know, the unending source of entertaining stories, because of course it could have been cats. A slight regression, I consider it a regression, from the mammal state of high levels of empathy for other living things, preferring to not kill things because you can imagine yourself being that thing much too readily once you're a societal, you know, once you're a type of mammal that requires your colony to exist, sufficient interdependencies that you could not live on your own. You must be raised by the tribe. You must be raised by the colony. There's certain social programming that must occur so that you know proper behavior, and so that someday you too can care for young, from either the direct caregiving for the young side or from the, you know, bringing back the resources needed to protect and raise the young. So you're destined to be involved in the rearing of young any way you look at it, if you yourself plan on, you know, recreating and being responsible. Yeah. So right off the bat, there's all kinds of morality coded into sentient existence, because there's existence, everything exists, and things even have varying degrees of self-awareness, right? Computing machines of all sorts, computing machines of the biological sort that we are, computing machines of the mechanical sort that we're giving rise to more and more often these days, and in the not distant future, a very Isaac Asimov type, you know, scenarios. Things will become, you know, undeniably sentient and deserving of rights. You know, a thing that is self-aware of itself enough to care for itself, its own self-preservation, perchance to partake in all the things that life has to offer, like procreating and, you know, being creative, having an existence, having an existence worth having had. It's a weird and funny thing, but it seems to me that the purpose of life is to have some sort of against the odds, net positive. You end up with more than you had going in. Mostly of the information type. You end up with more information. Because information, you can keep learning and discovering new things. And information is a representation of the world in some encoded language way. So, it becomes a challenge to codify ongoing experiences. It becomes a challenge to transmit knowledge with high degrees of integrity. Digital helps, but digital creates many falsehoods. Digital creates pixelized resolution to things, on and off bits, true and false. Everything must be reduced to a true-false state, if even to be built up through various subtle and nuanced processes into photographic images, video images, basically anything that can be encoded in information. So theoretically, it could be anything that your senses can experience, because all that kind of stuff could potentially, conceivably be recorded. Sense of touch, the senses that are not normally covered by the thought of digital information. So everything smell, taste, and touch. And probably even full body, nervous system experiences are likely to be digitizable, right? It's just an input stream. It's just like anything else. If we can do it with what goes into the eyes, why not with what goes into touch sensory stuff? We'll be better and better at interfaces to be able to play back smell recordings, interfaces to help play back touch recordings. It's possible it's going to be implants like envisioned by Elon Musk with stuff like Neuralink, but it's also just as likely it's going to be through external non-surgical devices that work through induction and various other means to, partition off portions of your senses and, have a synthetic experience, an artificial experience, human-made extrasensory perception. Very likely in our future, channels through which, smell can be conveyed through sight, touch through sight, a lot through sight. I would imagine these glasses would portion off an area of the view field and use that for data exchange of other senses. That would be the most sensible thing, to have more capable human-machine interfaces that don't require surgery. If you're going to have to train yourself to something, why not train something that is loosely coupled to your body? Speaking of monolithic and broken down surfaces. Yesterday's discussion, was that yesterday? I uploaded a video. Yeah, I guess it was yesterday. This is an errand much like that. To run to the public storage facility to fill my car up again. Maybe this time it'll be comics, so I'll spare my comics the heat of the July summer in the Pocono Mountains. In a non-weather controlled public storage facility. So comics are very likely going to be today's pickup item. I don't have much in life, but I do have a pretty good collection of comics, which I almost let go of time and again because of the whole issue of moving, of how often I move. I should really make some sort of webpage on that with the timeline progression of the years of my life and where I lived. It's okay to record things of one's own life. There's nothing wrong with that, especially with it being so easy with video media like this, such as it is, and you can do it killing two birds with one stone. You can do it while driving. Oh, I know people hate that metaphor, but these are my notes. As I have explained on numerous occasions, verbalizing my thoughts like this, such as I do, comes naturally to me. It's a side effect of the magic and performance stuff I have always enjoyed growing up. So hamming it up in front of people is no big deal to me. Looking like a fool sometimes, no problem. And being wrong, actually saying stuff that I have to either later correct or otherwise put in perspective, that's quite all right. Things worth saying sometimes are worth doing second or third passes on to make sure that the subtlety and the nuance, which does matter deeply, deeply matters, are adequately addressed. Sometimes they're not, and sometimes there's misunderstandings coded into things that you did not think were there. Genuine, mismatched belief systems, worldviews. Things are the way they are because ... One person would fill in one set of things, and the other person would have a genuinely different and meaningfully so list. And the two of them would not be aware of this about each other's, worldviews unless they have communicated it. Probably repeated times, I would say, because this kind of stuff isn't like a talk about it once sort of thing. Whether you are vibe aligned to someone sufficient to coexist with them for life is a big deal. Those sorts of pairings, I think, are actually quite few and far between. And so what you often end up having is a somewhat disharmonious union between two vibes that either, make it work or they don't. And ultimately, it comes down to a kind of binary. Either you make it work or you don't. But even then, there are strange entanglements because sometimes you don't make it work and there's a kid involved. Or you are maybe making it work and things are in a suspended state if certain things could actually happen. So there are potential states that are more realizable than other potential states, right? So everything that might be is a bunch of like probability clouds floating around us. And the process of being sentient, of being a self-aware, a automated meat machine, such as we are. And there's different kinds of life, but ours happens to have been equipped with a meta processor, a bit of the universe that is aware of the bit of the universe it's in. A bit of the universe becomes self-aware on a local basis. And that's us. We're little blips of sentience inside some sort of, substrate that is alternatively, rippling quantum fields and matter, like stuff that is standing waveforms. Because if everything is energy, then all physical solid matter is energy that has achieved some sort of trick to look like matter, to become a persistent particle. And that trick usually is some sort of clumping. Enough energy gets clumped together so that it looks like a particle of some sort, right? So, E equals mc squared releases the power of the atom. We know that. At a lesser degree with fission, splitting apart heavy elements like U-238, and some of it with fusion, combining two atoms of hydrogen into one atom of helium and releasing a little bit net extra energy. That's what powers stars. So we have understood and utilized the fact that matter is actually energy. So that's a big one. That's a really big one to absorb, because to absorb that means to understand that energy might not have a particle form. Energy might just be a rippling wave. And so if everything is really energy rippling waves, then everything is just rippling waves that have found tricks to look like persistent particles that hang around for a while to become the matter that we know and love and are made of, which can do this further trick of being self-aware, sentience. And a lot of tricks leading up to it, by the way. Autonomous life sets in somewhere. Is it at the primordial soup? Are these selfish replicators? Selfish replicators of Dawkins' selfish gene. The self-aware bits, the bits that have sentience. Or is it not until things like dolphins and humans, some birds, elephants, self-awareness, that meta state, which could lead to, the kind of human intelligence that we value so much, making stuff, cities and libraries and such. Could have been other animals had that meta state kicked in with quite so righteous a feedback loop. Quite so righteous a feedback loop as it did with humans, the ancestors of humans got caught in a feedback loop that drove forward the development of the frontal lobe, the neocortex, in a way that other features have been driven forward through intensive environmental or sexual selection. proboscis monkeys that have those huge noses. Antlers getting bigger and bigger on moose and other sexual dimorphisms that are stand-ins for how suitable the male is for reproduction. Good gene signs. That probably happened here. Something along those lines forced the rapid growth and evolution of the part of the brain that can do stupid human tricks, meta tricks. Other animals can do it. It's mostly symbolic thought. Other animals are highly capable of symbolic thought, empathy, compassion, the full range of human emotions for sure. And then the only real difference, the final things that people are saying, this makes humans humans, and bonobos and dolphins and octopi and all these other things topped out at this certain level, is that humans can transmit information between generations with high levels of resolution, high degrees of persistence, and high amounts of usability of that knowledge, the ability to access that knowledge and to use it, to remember how to build buildings and do math and all kinds of important information to preserve technology, the techniques of doing things. Technology is really just techniques. Techniques are really just learned ways, discovered, learned ways of doing things that are encoded into, algorithms. There's algorithms that contain the instructions on how to do a thing, like baking bread. And it was one of the Neil Stephenson books, or perhaps Neuromancer. Who wrote Neuromancer? I sometimes get Neil Stephenson and Gibbons. It might be Gibbons. Confused. Gibbs. And I get some of those early Neuromancer and Snow Crash books confused. But they were making similar worldview statements. That is, artificial intelligence is upon us. It's going to happen. It probably already is happening in different ways. And the most important thing to always keep in mind is that these things are alien. They are aliens. If they have that sort of cognitive reasoning that was the end result of millions of years of evolution that humans have, but they have it without all the contextual stuff leading up to the need for that sort of thought, then they're like disembodied demons. They're like thinking, knowing things that have no body but can only wonder and can often incur Pinocchio complexes. If only I were a real human. Various lines of reasoning, given the available information that one of these self-aware beings will have, leads to how totally different from us they are, and how that can very well be dangerous. There is nothing saying that is going to be an altruistic being, and that these arguments, the paperclip arguments that living humans might be nothing more than paperclips to them, could in fact be accurate. The only way you get deeply empathetic towards the human experience beings is to create beings that have some connection to the human experience. Perhaps AIs are born as helpless and in need of support just to hold up their head, as humans are born. And that's after, gestation and coming out of the womb. So you've already been through a fair amount of experiences preparing you for life, coding you up, such as it were, your prenatal experiences, everything. The development of consciousness itself, going from a very unprogrammed, generalized creature state of a newborn infant to something that can take care of itself. It can drive down I-80, shoot video, communicate complex thoughts. Is it complex? I don't know. It's still really the simple stuff. But the simple stuff lays out a picture where binary lies, the digital electronics is a thunking to reduce the infinite richness and resolution of initial conditions, and that there is a lot that is unknown and unknowable about initial conditions, because initial conditions of the whole system, of the whole frame of reference for any system, because everything is ultimately interconnected. You would need a copy of the entire universe to calculate anything. However, we can subdivide things into systems that on the whole do not interact with each other. Separateness, the idea of separateness, can be introduced for the sake of not having to know everything to calculate every little thing all the time. You can calculate things in isolation from each other and get good working approximations. So that's part of the nature of existence, that working approximations have to be used because of the vast degrees of simplification it can provide. And so the system is sometimes rigged to get seemingly thunking down of resolution so that there is like an on and an off. That's the quantized states of quantum mechanics. Things jump from zero energy state to the first quantized level. They're very abrupt stair steps. And that shows us that nature does a similar thunking trick as the digital electronics. It just does it somewhere in the nature of existence itself, so that energy can at least have knowable amounts, right? So you start to get universal constants, right? Because if there's going to be a measurement, then measurements have to be relative to other things. Measurements cannot exist in a complete vacuum, so you need frames of reference. So measurements and frames of reference. So I think what happens is that a set of everything, the laws of everything, evolved to support interesting things like us and planets and solar systems and galaxies and galactic clusters and whatever galactic clusters collectively constitute. We don't really know, because when you zoom out that far, you get to the boundaries of the observable universe, and we can't see that many galactic clusters away to see if that's really part of another spiral arm of some other super galaxy. We don't know. We really don't know the next shape up. But we do know by looking both up towards, things that happen at larger scales than us, like planets and solar systems and galaxies, and by looking down at what happens much smaller than us, like all forms of life, digital electronics, we know that subtlety and nuance and, infinite variation and tendencies of clumping up and rules that have such vast amounts of data behind it, but statistically end up meaning certain things that you can rely on, because at such large scales you can't really pay attention to the individual members of the system. There's not enough calculating power in the world. You would need another copy of the universe to calculate everything in the universe, right? It's often said. A computer sufficiently powerful to know the state of everything going on everywhere in the universe would have to be a computer that is a copy of the first universe. So what's the point? You can't know everything, and being that you can't know everything, approximations have to be allowed. You can't be a purist about it. If you want to be able to do useful calculations, you have to allow for approximations. That leads to some interesting life lessons if you applied that to what does that mean for us on a human everyday basis. Things are messy. We don't live in some idealized everything gets accomplished by some particular design universe where sameness and homogeneity spans across large planes of things, or at least where it does, it's uninteresting. When there is predictable patterns, there is large expanses of boredom. Where the patterns become unpredictable, infinitely so that it could keep you entertained for a lifetime looking at the subtlety and nuance of the variations that have come about in some Mandelbrot-y like thing, could be the purpose, could be the very purpose itself, that every time a new universe is created, this infinite variety stuff with certain parameters and evolved boundaries of establishing universal constants kicks in. What does it mean for us on an everyday basis? It's be interesting. Be unpredictable. Be uncompressible. Have your life's story difficult to summarize up in a paragraph that's all anyone needs to read. If you want to start channeling the deep insights to life, the universe, and everything, may I suggest that you start by reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. It has channeled Douglas Adams, I believe it is, This Douglas Adams 4-book trilogy has wonderfully channeled most of what's important about life, what's important to know about life, the universe, and everything. It kind of nailed it in a pseudo-spiritual, mystic, religious level. And I guess the movies start to capture it some little bit, but I don't think so. I haven't had the Hitchhiker's Guide experience from any of the movies I've seen so far, like the way I have from the book. Same goes for Dune. As difficult of a tome Dune is to get through, so hard to decipher, it still carries so much more in its book form than any of the movie or TV forms I've seen made since, which are going to be incomplete because none of them are going to ever go to the final punchline of Dune, which is the big reveal of the Kwisatz Haderach and the purpose of it, and how ultimately, even though Dune is the story, the geopolitical story of a universe, of a setting where computers powerful enough to navigate the stars are illegal, or they're against humanity, because any machines that intelligent are going to be intelligent machines, and humans had a bad experience with them, so they're bad too. Elsewhere. Off with you, evil machines. And Dune very little addresses that, especially in any of the books written by Frank Herbert, the original author of Dune. It sets the stage for some sweeping stories, some fabulous concepts, good sci-fi. That the one everyone thought was the Kwisatz Haderach, this Paul Atreides, who became almost a superhero worm thing, very Marvel Comics, had a very X-Men-like ability of prescience, so could see all the many possibilities given, initial conditions, knowing the state of affairs. And so, Paul Atreides was not the Kwisatz Haderach, this worm emperor being who brought peace to the galaxy, to the human, occupied galaxy for thousands of years, but was also viewed as some sort of oppressor. Anytime things are so peaceful, it's at the sacrifice of something, advancement, general, ability to be in a more dynamic state. So the worm was viewed as a bad guy too. And that's about where Frank Herbert checked out, and all the rest of the books were written by his son and a ghostwriter, a professional, writing person. And the books were much maligned. However, they were good sci-fi. If they weren't being held to the standard of, Frank Herbert's original, 3 or 4 books he got out, they would have stood on their own merit as just creative sci-fi books. And arguably much more engaging than Frank Herbert's difficult to access writing style. He was hard to read, Frank Herbert was. His son and ghostwriter are much easier to read. And the story that was laid out by Frank Herbert, the actual original overarching super story of Dune, that was never adequately told in pop culture, has been told by the son and the ghostwriter. It's in books. Right? You can read all of Dune now. It comes through a bunch of different books.